Good evening. I'm Matt Montgomery, new superintendent of Lake Forest Schools, and I'm excited to be with you tonight as we go over our risk mitigation plans. I have with me Dr. Michelle Shin, who's the Director of School Improvement, and Mr. Lane Linder, Director of Safety and Security. They are joining me and assisting me with some of the questions that we have received thus far, as well as me going over the plan in its initial state. We are thrilled to be able to offer All In every day to our students for the upcoming school year. And we remain hopeful and excited as we work to ensure student safety while turning our focus to teaching and learning. Tonight's town hall will be covering several topics. As I said previously, we'll be talking about the actual plan itself. We'll be talking about updated CDC and IDPH guidance, responding to your questions, and then giving you a preview of our next steps as we work to prepare for a successful start of school. We will begin tonight with the updated guidance that we have received from both the CDC and IDPH. You may have seen that on July 27th of this week, there were updated recommendations that included a major change for schools in that the CDC is now recommending universal indoor masking for all teachers, staff, students, and visitors to our schools regardless of the vaccination status. That same day, IDPH, or the Illinois Department of Public Health, confirmed or reaffirmed their support of the CDC recommendations that everyone, regardless of the vaccination status or their vaccination status, should wear a mask while in a school setting. Our mitigation plan is built around flexibility and adaptability. And those components will enable us to pivot and adjust as we adjust to new guidance from state, national, as well as local guidance and data that we are observing at the local level. One of the critical components of our plan is that we are strongly recommending, in line with CDC and IDPH, that all eligible staff and students consider receiving the COVID-19 vaccination. According to CDC, the leading prevention strategy is the vaccination, and we're encouraging all eligible staff and students to utilize this option if at all possible. Last spring, we offered in-house clinics. However, due to the widespread availability of vaccinations in the area, we are encouraging our community to utilize these opportunities to become vaccinated sooner rather than later. A second major component to our plan involves masking. And after the recent changes that I just shared that happened this week, Lake Forest Schools is strongly recommending that all individuals, students, staff, and visitors, regardless of their vaccination status, wear masks while they're on campus in our schools. The district, however, does not have a mandate or a policy enforcing this decision. However, there is a requirement per CDC and IDPH that while on public transportation or on buses in our case, masks will be required. And during tonight's message, parents will be informed about the choices that they have, as well as the consequences or the changes that may incur depending on what choices they make as individual families. I can't stress enough the importance of mask wearing. And remember, as we've heard over the last 18 months, masks provide that simple barrier that protects us from the respiratory droplets from reaching others. So not only are we protecting ourselves, but we are protecting others by making that choice. In addition to vaccination statuses or statuses as well as masking, we are also going to have on-site testing available for all symptomatic students and staff. And based on the guidance that we've received from CDC and IDPH, we are strongly recommending weekly testing for unvaccinated students who are participating in our extracurricular activities, whether it be athletics, band, chorus, or orchestra. In addition to testing, vaccinations, and masks, we have additional risk mitigation layers. The CDC recommended a layered approach to mitigation, and we have developed several layers to help meet that ask. And those are as follows. We are going to social distance at 3 feet wherever possible, in classrooms and in lunch, and we will work with our schedules to try to ensure that there is the most space possible given the amount of students in a given section or class. We are also asking families to sign a safe learning environment pledge, which really is a partnership between the schools and families in the community to show good faith in our adherence to the health and safety protocols. We are continuing to actively promote good hygiene, including frequent hand washing. We will be continuing enhanced cleaning and sanitation protocols in the school facilities and transportation. We will continue our enhanced ventilation in terms of filters and air purifiers. And we will be monitoring our data on a regular basis and providing access to our community through the COVID dashboards that will receive regular updates with not only internal data, but external as well. It should come as no surprise that we are living in a polarized environment where decisions are being made at the individual level that are impacting the greater good. And this district has always put social emotional wellness in the forefront, and it will continue to be so, maybe more now than ever, because we believe that we need to support our staff and students in the area of social emotional wellness, as well as adhering to our anti-bullying policy throughout this school year. We have always had the anti-bullying policy, but due to the environment that we're all living in, I think it is prudent to remind individuals of those policies and our strict adherence to the policies as we protect our staff and students, not only physically, but in a social emotional well-being as well. I want to thank those individuals who have submitted questions. There were many questions that were submitted, and we have looked for trends as a team to determine which questions would be the best to present to you tonight. And we will also be taking these questions and answers and building out an updated FAQ on our webpage we're calling it our all-in webpage, which will give you updated FAQs as well as guidance and other information. So at this time, I will go through the questions, and then I will ask Lane and Michelle to also help me field those based on what question topics are presented. One of the questions that we have been receiving a lot is dealing with really, why are we not requiring masking? So you can see two of the common ones. What's the reasoning behind loosening masking from required to recommend? And why is the district not mandating masking in the fall given the new CDC guidance for K-12 schools? This has been the biggest topic and challenge that we have been facing about where we were going to land as a district or districts around this idea. And one of the major decisions is last year, the governor issued an order to mandate masks. This year, the governor has not made that mandate. And therefore, we are following it and in line directly with the language that the CDC and IDPH is using, which is recommending universal masking. There was a change from the release of the plan on Monday to today in this presentation, given the updated guidance. And my hope is that you will know and appreciate that we are looking at that guidance and taking it seriously and pivoting and adjusting our plan accordingly. One thing I learned throughout this pandemic is that we are in a constant state of change as well as new learning. And this plan is nimble and will be adjusted if and when new guidance is warranted or new guidance is provided, as well as any changes or fluctuations in local data. Another question we received is more and more companies are requiring employees to register their vaccination status. Will we do the same with teachers, staff, and students? At this time, we're asking for voluntary proof of vaccination for our staff and students. However, I would be remiss if I didn't acknowledge that in any contact tracing, we will be looking not only at the vaccination cards that may or may not be provided, but also through the state-run system of iCares to have vaccination status verified through that statewide database to ensure that we are making the best decisions given the vaccination status with regard to quarantining in partnership with Lake County Public Health. I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Linder to explain the process, as well as Dr. Shin to help on how we are going to submit proof of vaccination, whether it be for staff or students.
Good evening, everyone. Thanks for joining us on this town hall. Our plan right now to obtain voluntary proof of vaccination is that within the next week, our families will receive an electronic survey. And on the survey will be 3 questions. The first question will be, yes, my child is vaccinated, fully vaccinated, and there'll be an opportunity to provide supporting information in proof of vaccination. The second available response will be, no, my child is not fully vaccinated. And then the third response on this electronic form will be, I decline to provide that information at this time, and we respect that. Please know that with a response like that, there's an assumption that the child is not fully vaccinated, and through contact tracing and exposures, until we receive verification of vaccination, that child will be treated as unvaccinated. This information will be available to health services staff, and they will also use the iCare system to provide verification of vaccination. Currently, we're not requiring proof of vaccination from staff at this time.
Thank you, Mr. Linder. I'm going to ask Dr. Shin to help me explain the answers to these quarantine questions, which is how do you define a close contact for quarantine guidelines? And then another question, my daughter is fully vaccinated. What happens if she is in close contact with a student who has COVID-19 in the school? Does she need to quarantine?
Great. Thank you, Dr. Montgomery, and good evening, everyone. The answer to the first question, what defines a close contact, is the same definition that we worked off of during the last school year, which is the CDC defines a close contact as an individual, a little different right now, but an individual not fully vaccinated against COVID-19 who was within 6 feet of an infected person for a cumulative total of 15 minutes or more over a 24-hour period. So that 6-foot distance is still important for those that are not fully vaccinated. The close contact definition, and this kind of leads into my answer for number 2, the short answer is yes, but I want to explain a little bit about what the variations are to this. So close contact, there's an exception in the CDC guidelines for our K-12 indoor classrooms. And it defines the close contact excludes students who are within 3 to 6 feet of an infected individual or an infected student where both students were engaged in consistent and correct use of well-fitting masks and other strategies for prevention are in place. So for this particular example, if the student is masked and is in close contact with somebody, that other person also has to be masked in order to avoid quarantine. So what essentially they are doing is holding on to the same 6-foot close contact definition, and they've reduced it to allow us to look at 3 to 6 feet, but only if both individuals are masked. So the importance of this is for those that are choosing to send students to school masked, especially for our younger population, it's a choice that you have, but the decisions that folks make about not masking other students may impact the quarantining for students and families that have chosen to send kids to school in masks. And for those of you that remember last year, we had students in pods at the elementary and middle school level. We had a very tight contact tracing pool that we had to look at. With opening our schools fully and running a full schedule, the opportunity for more contacts within the school context is going to go up greatly. And so our contact tracing and efforts to keep kids in school could be toppled pretty quickly, just due to the definition of the close contact and the option to wear a mask or not. So it's really important, I think, especially for our younger students who are not eligible for a vaccination, to be masked, and that allows them to stay in school as well as their peers in the classroom, so that we can maintain safety and in-person instruction, which was our goal last year, to keep people safe and keep people in school.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Shin. I want to reiterate what Michelle said about the importance of really thinking through your decision and the effects of those decisions as a family, because as Dr. Shin presented, if you were to be unmasked or send your student unmasked and they were around another student who was masked and you were a positive case or tested positive, that decision would have an impact on it could be one other student, it could be many other students. So while we are not creating a policy to mandate masks, strongly recommend is really, I don't want anyone to take that lightly. Additionally, more specific information from IDPH may be coming out in the weeks ahead. And they have released an initial FAQ, but we're expecting updates with specific information around the quarantining process. We are bound by the Lake County Health Department in determining who will be quarantined and who will not. That is not an option for us. And I have been told that if a family were to refuse a quarantine, they will be issued an order from Lake County Health. And then if the order is then ignored, then they would go through the court system at the next level. I was on a meeting yesterday with Lake County Health officials, the director, as well as other personnel, and the group of superintendents were really working through what this FAQ means, how do we work through the new guidance, as well as the FAQ.
Dr. Montgomery, if I could just add to, there are 4 options that are provided in the CDC guidance for quarantine. And without masking in our schools, we are really only eligible for one of those options, which would be a 14-day quarantine. There are other options for shortened quarantine, but they do require mask wearing for all individuals.
Thank you, Dr. Shin. The next topic is on COVID-19 testing, and I'm going to ask Mr. Linder to help us answer. Can you please clarify on COVID-19 testing? The plan mentions on-site testing for symptomatic individuals, but what about asymptomatic?
Thank you, Dr. Montgomery. Our plan at this point is to work with the Lake County Health Department, who is providing Binax Now rapid antigen tests to the school. Our staff will be trained, our health services staff will be trained. We'll have an isolation area available for students or staff throughout the school day who develop symptoms of COVID-19. They will go to these areas. The health services staff, using proper PPE, will be available and have the resources to administer tests on site. For our students, those tests will not be administered without pre-approval from a parent, so you can expect a phone call from the school nurse indicating that a student is down at the health services area exhibiting possible symptoms of COVID-19, and they will request the administration of a rapid Binax Now antigen test. Depending on the results of that test, obviously the student will be isolated and sent home. We are expecting an uptick this year, not only potentially in COVID-19, but as well as normal colds and flus as the seasons progress. Regarding asymptomatic students, looking at the guidance currently as it reads, again, terms are, it's recommended for students participating in athletics and extracurriculars. We are leaving those decisions up to parents to pursue testing on their own and provide the results of those tests to the school so that we'll have that information available to determine any levels of exposure or any risk to other students or staff in the building.
Thank you, Mr. Linder. The next question that we've been receiving is around the air purification process or system in school buildings. And the question is, how are you specifically addressing air quality as a risk mitigation strategy? And when we look at risk mitigation with regards to air purification, we're following the American Society of Heating, Refrigerating, and Air Conditioning Engineers filtration and ventilation recommendations within the limits of the buildings or building current HVAC systems. And that includes recommendations of installation of additional air cleaners to help achieve better filtration. And we also have portable air purifier units in all of our classrooms, along with increasing the amount of fresh air in the classrooms per their recommendation. Together, these mitigation measures will help us deliver and maintain the healthiest possible air in our district classrooms. A question we received is, why the emphasis on choice over safety? I would say that safety is paramount, and we're not emphasizing choice over safety. In fact, we are in line with the CDC and IDPH guidelines and recommendations, word for word, in fact. And the plan that we built, we believe, is nimble and agile. And we also want to acknowledge that health and wellness is a very personal matter, and there's personal decisions that are that we would like to also afford to family members. So I believe in finding a balance between all of these components, which has been most challenging. However, the plan is built in such a way where more restrictions can be implemented should our local data change. Currently, our data is favorable. However, if there is changes in the local data, they will be assessed, and potential more restrictive environments could be instituted. For example, if there's a spike in numbers or an outbreak, their masks could go from being strongly recommended to mandated based on changes or fluctuations in our guidance from the national, state, local, as well as our data that we're seeing in our classrooms, in our buildings, and in our community. I want to take a moment and talk about next steps. For our next steps, we are really going to continue to monitor and update and engage with our community. So we'll be tracking local data, county data, state data, specifically around community transmission, incident rates, vaccination coverage, testing, and outbreaks. And these data sets are recommended areas of focus from the CDC. We will be updating District 67 and 115 COVID-19 dashboards for weekly community reference. We'll be releasing the memberships of the COVID-19 Metrics Council the week of August 2nd, and we will be convening that council for the first meeting mid-August. And we will continue to keep the community updated on an ongoing basis. And I can't overstate how important the component is that this plan is able to flex as circumstances require. And I would encourage you, after this meeting and then subsequent days, to visit the All-In webpage with our updated FAQs as new questions come in or new issues arise that we want to make sure that everyone is on the same page. I would like to ask Dr. Shin and Mr. Linder to help us talk a little bit about the importance of getting to know your school nurses.
Sure. Next to our administrators and our families, I think in our schools, our nurses play a critical role. They always have a critical role, but they have really been on the front lines with helping us with screening, helping families with quarantine guidelines, and trying to keep our schools safe. So we have 5 school nurses in District 67 that will continue to play a large role both in testing as well as helping parents navigate the quarantine guidelines. And we do anticipate we're going to have a lot of questions about whether COVID symptoms are related to a cold or flu. So please touch base with your school nurses if you have any questions about the health and safety guidelines, questions about quarantine, or if you have particular issues related to medical conditions, either for a student or for family members that you may want to talk through with the school nurses. And we also have 2 nurses at Lake Forest High School that will be serving in the same capacity and providing those services for the high school students.
Thank you.
I'd like to add that we also have brought in the assistance of an outside nurse into the school this year, so that we can manage not only our daily caseload for our students, but also we can properly deal with possible COVID-related matters and possible increase in flus and colds, et cetera, that may come into the building as the seasons progress. So we encourage great communication with our health services department for families that have questions related to medical health of their students, and that they touch base frequently with the nurses. They will be our key point in the health and safety plan.
Thank you both. This slide is merely a reminder for all of us to be kind to each other. We have went through 18 months of challenges, and we are now entering our 3rd school year of trying to provide instruction during a pandemic. And I think the polarization that we're experiencing is fierce as ever. And I would just encourage you, and I remind myself the same thing, to be empathetic to differing viewpoints, to be open to hear others' thoughts, and to remember that we are all experiencing this pandemic in unique ways. And I hope that we remained a loving, caring community who has the focus of students and their well-being at the forefront of all of our actions. I want to thank you for being with me tonight, as well as Dr. Shin and Mr. Linder for joining me. And a shout out to our staff and our teachers, and their work, as well as administrators, continues to be challenging on a day-to-day basis. And I thank them for what they do every day and what they will continue to do as we navigate these uncharted waters together. And I want to thank you as family members. And I appreciate you reaching out to me, asking these thoughtful questions, and know that we will get through this together. And I remain hopeful as we begin this new school year. Thank you again.